And good evening, good afternoon, good night, good morning. I don't know when you're listening, but whenever you are, we hope you're having a good day thus far. I'm Ryan Tofil. This is Unpopular Opinions. Before we jump into it, I just want to mention that today's episode is brought to you in part by eToro. eToro.com is a website, or you can use an app if you feel inclined to do that. And what eToro is, it's a way to buy crypto with confidence. And their selling points are the community that you're going to be able to interact with, and what you can do is you can even create a virtual portfolio, and you can practice trading crypto without risking your real money to kind of get a feel for how the market fluctuates. And they're even adding a feature where you can copy the top performing users' portfolios and kind of use their strategies in your own portfolio to hopefully, help give you some experience and insight that can usually only come about by years of crypto trading. So again, that's eToro.com. If you like Unpopular Opinions, be sure to check them out because they're helping us out bringing you this show. Anyways, I'm Ryan Tofil. This is Unpopular Opinions, and for the first time on this show, Jake Harp.
Hello, Ryan Tofil.
Well, good.
I didn't know if that was my cue to come in or if you were gonna, if you had like a bio for me that you were gonna
yeah, he's wearing a gray shirt.
Yeah.
That's your bio.
Okay.
What do you want me to tell the people?
Tell him about my hair.
Oh, he's got brown hair. It's very nice hair. It's kind of like a lighter brown, but not really a dirty blonde. Yeah, go look him up. We've got Jake Harp here. On the You, Me, and BTC network, it's been a little bit of a layoff, but we're really, really happy to be back. I think we might even bring you some episodes with Brian Chai in the near future, so you can go ahead
Let's
and
hope not for your sake. That guy's
be sure to avoid
idiot.
those.
Holy cow.
But Jake Harp and we've been excited lately because Crash Team Racing.
Yeah.
Maybe the multiplayer game of our childhood.
Of a generation.
I don't know about a generation.
Well, depending on where you live, where you grew up.
Okay, yeah. If you grew up in rural Western New York,
yeah,
and went to the specific
if you had
high school,
Mr. Pikevich as your earth science teacher in 9th grade, it's fair to say CTR is a game of your generation. 10th grade, sorry.
Yeah. I was just thinking in my head that I usually leave out specific details about people who aren't here.
And then you think he's listening?
No, I don't think he's listening, but
maybe his kid.
Yeah, I leave out specific details of people, and then I went and corrected you on the grade.
Well, you gave out my name already.
Yeah, but you volunteered.
I didn't sign anything.
You followed me over here while I rode my scooter. I got a new scooter today, and it's kind of cool because I can ride around on that instead of loading up in a car. It's just electric. It goes like 20 mph. Yeah. So around here in town, that's like everything you need. Yeah, I mean, I got to Dan Brown's house in no time at all. I mean, Dan Brown's
it took longer
mansion.
for him to set up the freaking audio setup than it did for us to get over here in your scooter. That was a nightmare.
Was quite a thing. Because we were sitting here, we must have had to say check and testing into these mics about 1,400 times, and Jake still doesn't sound good.
Nope, but that's just how it's going to be, though.
So we dove in with a little bit of Crash Team Racing last night. We gave it a go. The Crash Team Racing Nitro Fueled. So it's not a remaster, it's a remake because they've kind of smushed the first two Crash kart racing games together, Crash Team Racing and then Crash Nitro Kart, which nobody really played. And they also even included some skins and stuff from the third game, Crash Tag Team Racing, which really nobody played.
Yeah. So it's great. So it's like we're all seeing it for the first time. It's almost like it's brand new.
Yeah, like I never played the second Crash It wasn't Crash Team Racing. I never played Crash Nitro Kart, which was the second in the series. So to see some of these new tracks and stuff on there, it's really like playing a new game for a first time, and you're only paying $40.
Yeah. The new tracks are nice. For me, I personally enjoyed playing the old tracks more from the original CTR.
Yeah,
Polar Pass,
you remember
Papu's Pyramids.
You remember when you said to me that this is what they were trying to make the game the first time around?
That's exactly what I said, and I'll stand by that. What
do you mean?
Well, obviously, when you're making a PS1 game, back in what year did it come out? 1999. Technology is a little different. This is literally 20 years later, as hard as that is to believe. Game developers were working with constraints much more so than they are now. And I remember you said when we were playing last night, this is exactly how I remember the original CTR. Yeah. But obviously it's not. You could put them side by side, right, and it's like you can barely actually see what's happening in the original game.
Yeah.
But of course, this is PS4, 1080p, whatever, 4K, I don't know. But, crystal clear HD graphics on the tracks that we thought looked good before, but you go back and play it now, it didn't look good.
I mean, I think that Crash Team Racing had pretty decent graphics for that that era. There are a lot of games on the N64 and the PS1 where when they're trying to make the switch from 3D, everything became such a jumbled mess that it was kind of hard to tell what was going on.
Yeah, those first 3D games, I mean...
Oh, yeah. I don't know if you have any examples, but like when the N64... first came out, they had a few pretty good ones with like Super Mario 64 and Wave Race.
Oh yeah, huge Wave Racer fan right here.
Wave Racer.
I think that's the official title.
They kept those like really simple and clean though. Like there was never too much going on in a small area at one time. When you got into stuff like sports games, like the first 3D Madden games were
Madden 64.
They were absolutely brutal because like all the action you have going on in one place and 11 players trying to interact with each other on the screen, it really did not look good to the point where sometimes it was hard to tell what's going on. I'm sure at the time people were pumped.
Yeah. But we were pumped at the time, but it's all relative based on what you've seen before that.
Yes. The thing is I didn't really have the same experience. Like when I boot up Madden now, maybe it's because I've played 10 versions of Madden in the last 20 years. I didn't have that same sense of like, wonders like when you're a kid booting up a game. When I booted up CTR when I was a kid, it just blew the back of my head right off.
And I know your mom got tired of cleaning the wall off.
yeah, hospital bills were outrageous.
Brains everywhere.
So this remaster has brought back some of those feelings, and it's honestly, when I was 10 years old, I thought that Crash Team Racing looked as good as the remaster does.
Right.
Like,
and I agree with that.
Like, what the remaster looks like would be if you just took everything about the original that was good and then made the whole game that quality.
Yeah. Yeah, and we were saying it even goes beyond just the looks of it into the actual gameplay mechanics. Because I think the original CTR, the handling, it was good, but it was also very clunky in certain areas. Especially when you had to use the D-pad on the original PlayStation controller before they got
I still use the D-pad.
joystick.
I was using the D-pad last night.
Well, maybe I need to start using the D-pad because I was struggling a bit. But the controls are so much more smoother in this remake, but not to a degree that it makes it too easy. It's still
Right.
It's still just as challenging.
Oh yeah, it's hard. I mean,
that's also where I was getting at when I said about how I think this is how they were trying to make it initially. This is, and it would be interesting. Probably not, but I wonder if like any of the same developers worked on this remastered version as did the original.
That's a good question. I think even if they didn't, unless they were just overtaken by envy that the new people got to work on it, they have to be happy with how it turned out.
I would think so. I mean, this was done by Naughty Dog, right?
The original and
what about this remake?
Activision and Beanox. I don't know the difference between like a publisher and a producer and a developer.
Yeah,
but I know that Activision announced or I guess
right. They're the publisher. Right?
Oh, they're the publisher.
I think so.
And then, but Beanox was the people that actually like built the game, and I don't know if that's a subsidiary of Activision or some company that was contracted.
Well, Naughty Dog still exists, right?
Well, yeah. Well,
they did all the Uncharted games,
The Last of Us,
yeah.
Which, the second one has not.
Are we still recording here? Last thing you said.
Let's just be honest.
Last of Us.
Let's be honest with the people. We're not going to be able to cover up that mistake. We had a little bit of technical difficulties. It happens to everyone.
Yeah, but us more than others.
Yeah, us more than others. Not more than NBC News.
Yeah, those frickers.
So we are recording this as the second Democratic primary debate occurs, but last night. It was really impressive how somebody like NBC couldn't get it together in front of millions of viewers.
Yeah. I mean, it was almost surreal watching them try and figure out what was going on. And then when they cut it, it went so long that they had to cut to a commercial, which they had just done. And they were long commercial breaks too.
Yeah. So I was watching the online feed and it had like a ticker that went down. So they came back from commercial, had technical difficulties, and then went to 4 minutes of commercials.
Right, and with maybe a minute in between, all of which was technical difficulties.
Yeah, probably 90 seconds.
So we're talking like 8, 9, 10 minutes of nothing, basically.
I don't know if the first commercial break was that long, but it was a lot of nothing, just like the entire thing was. I don't care what your political affiliation is. If you aren't a little insulted by these people speaking Spanish at you just to prove that they can speak Spanish, then I don't know what to tell you, man. Like that. Great. If you can speak Spanish well, that's awesome. And I would encourage anybody who can to learn more than one language. I speak very little
terrible
Spanish.
Yeah.
I speak terrible Spanish, but to just know any Spanish, I get pumped up about it, and it's like exciting to me. Whenever I get to use it, I'm happy to. I don't want to offend somebody, and if somebody speaks like very, very good English, I'm not going to try to talk to them in Spanish just because they look like they would know Spanish.
Yeah,
but it was just pure pandering.
Pandering, that's a good word for it. And I think, I mean, I don't know for sure. I only know anecdotally, but I would have to think even Hispanic people, even Democratic people had to have been a little bit insulted by that. And I only know a coworker of mine, he said he heard from Brian Chai, the frequent guest.
Yeah, my frequent guest
on this very show, told me a friend of his who is Hispanic, who is a Democrat, was watching the debate, was incredibly insulted and just thought it was ridiculous the way that
I think they were speaking Spanish fine, like they obviously could communicate in that language, but it wasn't flawless. They did say some things that were like technically incorrect, but a native Spanish speaker knew what they were trying to say, and turns out it wasn't anything of substance either.
Yeah, well, I honestly don't even know what they said in Spanish. I didn't look that up. Did you know what they actually were saying in Spanish?
I can understand people speaking Spanish if I ask them tranquilo about 15 times. And I said tranquilo at the TV, which means like calm down.
Alexa, tranquilo.
Yeah, tranquilo is like something you would say if you had like a bunch of like kids around you and stuff, which happened. I was on El Salvador on a missions trip, and they know that you have more stuff and more money than them, and they're like ask you for stuff and you know or to play with them or something, and they'll be just like tugging at your pants or your shirt and just like a bunch of kids around you. And that's one of the times you have to go tranquilo, and they're all jumping up and down and just going insane. So but that just means like calm down, tranquilo por favor, like just slow down a little bit. And then I could understand them. These people in the debate were talking too fast for me to understand, but looking at the translation, they were just saying incredibly generic.
Yeah. Well, it was funny too, because the first time, Beto was the first person to speak Spanish, and he did it at the same time he was dodging a very simple, straightforward yes or no question.
Yeah.
And so the moderator asked him a yes or no question. He starts speaking Spanish, doesn't say yes or no in Spanish.
Yeah.
Then starts speaking English, doesn't say yes or no. Then she gave him another 10 seconds, still doesn't answer the question, basically. So it was almost like it was a way to deflect the attention.
Yeah. And then he had to pull it out like his first or second question, just immediately. Like right. he was already out of tactics to avoid questions.
Yeah. Do you know what Beto O'Rourke's actual real name is?
No, I thought that was his real name.
No, that's not his real name.
I think either his wife or his mom is named Amy because
I don't know what his wife or his mom's name is, but his real name is Robert Francis O'Rourke. He's not Hispanic at all.
Is Beto a Spanish name?
Yeah, I mean it kind of
sounds Spanish.
Yeah, or at least kind of like, foreign in some way. He goes by Beto I don't know where it originated. I'm not going to pretend like I know that, but obviously it's a, street cred sort of thing. So that's just kind of sums up his entire persona. I think it's just pandering, trying to seem like he's someone that he isn't.
What about, okay, hang on. Help me get the story straight about what exactly he said about, he either had like a fantasy about like a 14-year-old boy, or he was a 14-year-old boy and wanted to kill somebody. I have to admit, I'm not going to really be able to help you get it straight, but it was a story that he wrote when he was young. Okay. I think he was either in high school or he might have been early in college, and he wrote some stories that had some really just like about like killing a young kid or like doing something sexual. It was something weird.
Yeah, and then he also had he was like in some hacker group or something. That had some
Julian Assange
crazy name. I don't remember. He's got an interesting history, but I don't think any of that's going to matter because he basically self-destructed last night.
You think that one of the favorites is going to take... They're only going to eliminate up to half of the people off that stage. He was in the center. They put him in...
He's not one of the favorites. I mean, the way that worked out, he was kind of like... The media loves him. They want him to be a favorite. But just if you look at the polling, he's nowhere close. It's Biden is far and away above everyone. Then it's Bernie Sanders is pretty far above everyone. And then Elizabeth Warren is typically third. The way they did these debates, it was supposed to be a random draw. So they split all the candidates between 2%, below 2% polling averages, and above 2%. And then they did a random draw, so it'd be half and half from those two groups. It just so worked out that Elizabeth Warren was the only real top 5 contender that got drawn into the first debate. Now, a lot of people were saying it wasn't actually a random draw and they were they were trying to boost Warren, basically.
Trying to boost Warren by putting her up against a bunch of
giving
bozos.
her an easier competition, which I don't know. I mean, that's definitely possible. If you look at the last Democratic primaries,
you're going to have
their
to
hand on the scales for Hillary.
Best, though. Well, they did. They did have
that's a proven fact.
But I'm saying, even if they wanted Elizabeth Warren, like it's like a playoff bracket. You're still going to have to play Bernie, and you're going to have to play Biden eventually.
Right, but I feel it's all about momentum.
Get an early momentum.
It's all about momentum. So the people who don't get momentum going right now, especially when you have 20 candidates, I think there's more than 20 candidates. Some of them didn't even get
25.
Some of them didn't even get on the stage. Those guys are done, right? They don't have any momentum. They weren't in the first debate. They're done. Their campaign's going to run out of money.
One of the candidates was Wayne Messam. You heard of him?
No.
So he was on NBC doing some post-game analysis for him. He's an American businessman and politician serving as the mayor of Miramar, Florida. And he was complaining that money kept him out of the first debate, and he was hoping, but he went on NBC and ended up with just about as much speaking time as any of the other candidates.
Smart play.
Because he volunteered as an analyst for what all these people were saying, and now he's saying, hey, I just got to get enough money to go into the next one, and I'm going to school these guys. Apparently he makes $43,000 per year as the mayor of Miramar, Florida, but he has a house worth over $500,000.
Yeah.
So I don't know what the deal is. If it just shows you how much money these guys get from outside sources to be able to afford.
A lot of these politicians will go into office not that much money, but then after they've been in there for a few years, you look at their net worth and it's millions and millions, tens of millions. Which got Joe Biden, poster boy for that. He was, he always presented himself, still does, as the middle class guy for the people, blue collar guy. Mm-hmm. You look at his net worth now. He's not a middle-class guy anymore, and he hasn't been for a while.
And it's, the president of the United States is obviously going to be the top earner and only gets $500,000 a year.
Right.
So how these senators and Congress people can come out with millions and millions and millions of dollars of net worth.
Yeah. So it is true that a lot of them will have already made money in other areas before they, I don't know what was this guy's name that you said? The mayor guy who was
Wayne Messam.
Maybe he's had another, you
John
said he
Delaney.
$43,000. Maybe he's had another job. Maybe he owns a business. I don't know that he got some money with. But yeah, it is definitely a real thing with a lot of politicians. And I think that's kind of what attracted a lot of people to Trump. He's already got the money. He's not going to be trying to use this to enrich himself.
Yeah. And
I'm not saying whether that's true or not. I'm not advocating for that stance, but I think that a lot of people bought into that.
Told it like it is, and I'm not going to pretend to be a fair and balanced commentator on this because I am very, very much more conservative than I am liberal. I would have to say that I'm a libertarian because there are a lot of different issues that I think we should allow people to judge for themselves, and we've been given free will. I don't agree with too much.
What the heck?
We just had a huge crash going on in the back here.
What's going on?
With too much of what the left has to say. So when it comes to who's right or wrong in an argument against each other, I'm probably not the best person. But what I do know is that Donald Trump won the last election because middle class people and the heartland of America people felt like nobody had spoken to them in about 20 years.
Right.
And every single one of them voted for Donald Trump. And whether it was on Twitter today or it was the reaction last night,
none of these people on the stage were speaking to those. I mean,
Tim Ryan did a little bit, and nobody reacted.
Did you see him up there? That was uncomfortable to watch. He wasn't looking very comfortable up there. And then Tulsi Gabbard kind of was giving him the business.
Well, yeah, she was giving him the business because it was a very convenient answer. It was the much easier answer. What this argument was about was whether we should have any troops at all in the Middle East. And I think a very reasonable point to that is that when you leave the terrorists from the Middle East alone, they multiply and things get worse. And that's what Tim Ryan was trying to say. And Tulsi Gabbard said that that's unacceptable. And how are you going to explain that to parents who are dying or their children are dying, which is going to get the people in the audience fired up.
Yeah.
But,
well, look, I'm not saying one position was right over the other, but as is the case in so much of this stuff, especially with debates, it's all about the perception. I don't think that one was
right over the other.
And the perception
think that
was that he got destroyed by Tulsi Gabbard. I mean, you can look around and everyone's saying that. And he was already a very much a
long shot,
outsider, long shot candidate. I don't think he had a chance to begin with. He's done after that. So who else do you have speaking to the blue collar Trump voter on the stage? I think Delaney was trying to. But
he was the only other one who addressed the reason the Democrats lost the last election,
right?
Which is what they need to be talking about. They had a historic collapse in 2016. I mean, this is not only like polls and stuff conducted by the media, but probably 95% of like just people you would go ask on the street felt like Hillary Clinton was going to win.
Right.
I mean,
she was already crowned. Her coronation.
The New York Times
underway.
Went into polling with their little meter at 95% chance of victory for Hillary Clinton. And they blew it because they did not pay attention to Heartland America, to Middle America, to middle class, lower middle class.
Yeah. So, and right, you could see Delaney intentionally trying to tap into that in the way he was talking, the answers he was giving. The problem for him is going to be actually winning and getting through the Democratic primary, because there's such a strong contingent among the Democrats of the far left progressives that you can see it happening with Biden as well. They're dragging the candidates to the left in order to comply with the modern Democratic Party, the Ocasio-Cortez, and those people
I do want to talk about how they are going further left, but one thing they would not do, I don't know how many people were asked point blank, will you confiscate people's guns?
Right.
And not one of them said yes or no. Now, I don't know what that means. If they're going to say no because they know that would outrage half of the people who would vote for them, and then they're just going to go do it anyways. I really don't know what that means.
That was interesting because you saw in a lot of other cases, they were kind of racing each other to the left. And by that, what I mean is on healthcare, they're saying, no, I want to have full government healthcare. No, I was for that first. They're all competing to get further left, basically.
Yeah, and it was kind of like the competition of who was taking who was speaking better Spanish. They were trying to one up each other, like, I'm going to make sure that the government pays for all healthcare. Well, I'm going to make sure the government pays for all healthcare, including abortions. Well, right. I'm going to make sure the government pays for all healthcare, including abortions for transgender people.
I was just going to say that was by far the funniest moment of the entire debate. Julian, I hope I pronounced that right. Julian Castro.
Yeah. And then I guess I don't know if that's like how a Mexican person wants you to pronounce their name, or if it's more polite to pronounce it like you would in English, but they were putting so much extra flavor.
Especially if, I don't know, I just saw a few minutes of the post-debate coverage on NBC, and just the way they were all saying that was just so clearly has an agenda.
Yeah.
Anyways, his moment there where they're talking about abortion, everyone's trying to get further and further to the left on abortion, as if that's possible. They're already, so far out there. And so he has to come up with this crazy scenario in order to get further left of everyone else.
Yeah.
And he says, well, I believe in reproductive rights for everyone. And one thing no one else is talking about is I also believe in reproductive rights for transgender women. Which, to me, when he said that, it was like a parody.
Yeah.
It's, if you were making a parody of that debate, that is probably like what a line you would have included in it.
It would be like if SNL was doing a skit about the debate.
Right. And well, not really, because SNL would never.
Okay, we'll say some nonpartisan sketch show is doing something about the debate, and they're just all trying to say the most outrageous things, and they're like, I'm going to take guns from all the gun owners and then shoot them in the head with their own bullets. Right. And then we're going to get abortions for all people, including transgender.
Yeah.
So But the gun thing was the only thing that they were not trying to out-liberal each other.
Yeah.
And I think maybe that's one thing that even some I don't know who they were talking to on that one.
Well, I think it's just they didn't want they were all being pretty, they were trying to get as far as they could to the left on it without committing to confiscation. Because confiscation is different than everything else, because that actually requires government force, and it could get messy. And so that's kind of a hot button buzzword that I don't think anyone quite wanted to commit to yet.
Do you think if you were a big gun owner and somebody came to your house to collect them, how would you just give them to them?
That's hard for me to say. I mean, I think what I can say is there's a lot of gun owners who definitely wouldn't.
It would
it would be a real mess to try and forcibly confiscate.
Yeah, that is not
guns.
Even if it's some law that people like, no matter how many people think taxation is theft, even if they're just refusing to pay it, it's not going to end in death.
Right.
There are a lot of people out there who are going to hand you that gun with the barrel pointed right at you,
and some coming out of it.
Yeah, and it would be literally like starting a civil war. I mean, I don't know if it would erupt into like a full scale war. You would have a lot of deaths on both sides of the law.
Yeah. Well, I don't even want to think about that happening. And hopefully, none of them were willing to commit to confiscation. Hopefully that's a sign that there's not a widespread appetite to go down that road at this point.
So do you think that they may start to lose anyone by going too far left?
I think so. I think last night's debate, it's hard for me to say who was a winner last night other than Trump. Honestly, because I don't think anyone came out looking good. Now, we have, like we said, we have the second stage 2 going on right now, and that has some of the bigger contenders like Biden and Sanders. But to me, one person who I've heard a lot of buzz about, even people on the right or more moderate saying they thought had a good performance was Tulsi Gabbard. I think she could appeal to people more in the center that would be likely to maybe be turned off by a more further left candidate. But the reality is, I mean, look at the polling. It's going to be a huge mountain for her to climb to get anywhere near actually contending.
Yeah, I really didn't have a problem with anything she said. It was, I don't know if like resentment is kind of the right word. I felt like in her big moment, it was against Tim Ryan, saying that this is an unacceptable answer to say we'll have to explain to one more parent why their child died in the Middle East. Like, it's not that simple.
Like it was an oversimplified emotional play.
Yes, which totally, like, I mean, it's easy. If somebody went up there and just said no war ever and found a way to emotionally connect with me, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's reasonable, that would be absolutely fantastic. But it's just not realistic. Just like I never ever want somebody to die in war. But the reality is, if you just completely ignored Al-Qaeda and the Taliban and ISIS, they would get bigger.
Probably. At least ISIS definitely would.
So while saying we're not going to explain to any more parents why their children died is good right now, you might be explaining to more people why their family member died in the future. If you don't, and I'm not taking sides on that. I'm just saying one is a lot more convenient right now.
Now, you have a lot of good points there. Did Tim Ryan make any of those points coherently?
No, he was trying
not
to,
really.
and I didn't make them very well either. I'm also not a career politician, and I like talking about crash team racing a lot more than I do talking about the Middle East.
Right, and so the only point I'm making is the perception was, which unfortunately is really all that matters in these debates, is the perception of the majority of the people. Perception was Tulsi Gabbard.
Tulsi Gabbard.
She obliterated him in that moment. That's the perception. So that's what happened far as the debate.
I think if you would read that written down on paper, it would be way closer to 50-50. I don't know. I just felt bad for Tim Ryan and John Delaney because they were the only ones up there saying how you were going to beat Donald Trump was by taking back the voters who just felt so angry and ignored that they had no other choice but to vote for him.
Yeah, and those guys won't be on the stage for much longer.
Yeah, probably not. Instead, they were overshadowed by people who are going to alienate like even more logical people. Like I don't think it's a super big stretch to say that regardless of where you are on abortion and stuff, that if somebody comes up to you and asks, hey, do you want to pay for a transgender person's abortion? They're probably going to say no.
Laugh, probably.
Yeah. And it's like the free college or the college bailout thing that we're going to eliminate all these people's debt. That's great. And I'm not being a dick when I say I don't want to give these kids a bailout because I had to pay for it, because where is this money coming from?
Right.
It has to come from somewhere. So now I'm paying for the college I went through plus somebody else. And maybe the answer to that would to just be have a little bit more insight in high school about trade schools,
yeah,
about community colleges.
I mean, this is a whole nother topic, but way too many people go to college in the first place.
Way too many people go to college, and way too many people go to expensive colleges because they have their hooks so far into the high school I don't know if
the
if
guidance
you want to call it the
counselors,
psyche,
the establishment.
Yeah, and just into the culture of high school, like all your junior and senior years are about is like a popularity contest of who's getting into what school and how they want to go, and it's like a competition of who can spend more money to go to the better school.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And of course, learning a trade, whether you're going through a trade school, whether you do an apprenticeship, whatever, is, and for a lot of people, a way better idea than going to college for 4 years, spending a few $100,000, and maybe they're not really sure what they want to do.
Yeah.
Maybe they're not, they get a degree that they get stuck with because they weren't sure halfway through and they had to go with something. That happens to all too many people. I don't know if you ever watch or read anything from Mike Rowe.
Dirty Jobs.
Yeah, but he's got a big foundation, and I unfortunately can't remember the name of it. But basically, he's doing this exact thing, trying to encourage more people to, instead of going to college, to some liberal arts college for a degree in communications or some bullcrap, which is what I have a degree in, and probably you do too.
Integrated marketing, digital media and communications.
To go learn how to be a welder or a plumber, things like this, which in most cases you learn that and you'll end up making more money than this person who went to liberal arts college after a few years, and you haven't spent nearly as much to get that.
And being out of college, what I realized is that college actually prepared you for very little other than giving you a piece of paper that says you can accomplish something. It's like an obstacle course, and like, yeah, if you can complete this obstacle course, it probably means that you have the mental toughness and determination to be able to do other things also.
Yeah, I mean, that's the idea. Is that actually true? Probably not. But of course, there are so many jobs that say, just as a requirement, you have to have a bachelor's degree, and that's it. So that kind of perpetuates the college culture, like you were talking about in high school, of an assembly line forcing people to go through college. But yeah, I think it's a bad thing for the country, for sure.
And these colleges just make so much money with exponentially rising tuition costs.
Well, and part of that is it's like a cycle. The way it's set up right now, it's a never-ending cycle, because there is so much, even though people end up racking up big debts, there is a ton of government money and government loans in play that are available to such a large percentage of the population, which then in turn allows these colleges to charge ever increasing tuition rates.
If the government would stop giving this money out and people couldn't afford to go to these places,
the tuitions would be so much lower. Like, if we look at our parents' generation, they could go work in the summer at a farm or whatever, a restaurant or something, and make enough money to pay for the year's tuition. That's absolutely absurd to think about in this day and age. But there wasn't as much government involvement in the payments. And so if people say, oh, this college debt crisis and this tuition cost inflation crisis is an indictment on capitalism. No, it's not. It's actually the opposite, because the government getting involved in providing all this cheap money to 18-year-olds who don't know any better is what's driving up these tuition prices higher and higher and higher.
Yeah, it would be like, if an 18-year-old is standing by the side of the highway and he has 500 miles to go, and a bank walked up to him and it's like, hey, here's a 1984 Buick and here's a 2019 Dodge Challenger. What one do you want? We're covering both of them for you, and you just pay us back when you can, when you get to your destination, because there's a huge pile of money there. What one is the kid going to take? Obviously, it's going to be the Challenger.
And it also goes back to, like you're saying, the high school culture. These kids are not educated enough to think through these decisions. They're not learning what debt really means.
Right. And I am extremely lucky to have come out of college debt free. I did have some help, but also I spent 3 semesters at a public state community college to get my associates, and then one of the semesters where I was going to get my bachelor's degree, I lived at home and went to a 4-year state college.
Yeah.
And the costs were so much lower, and I don't think that the education at the state schools was probably better, honestly, than the private one I went to.
I mean, it's not these kids. Most of them, they don't even care about the education. The problem, why a lot of people wouldn't want to take the path that you took, it doesn't have the glamour, the college glamour, that we see about in movies and TV shows, which is what mostly the kids care about.
You don't think I was glamorous in college?
Well, you were glamorous, but the colleges you were going to were slightly less glamorous than yourself.
Right.
Is all I'm getting at. You weren't in fraternities and going to these huge house parties. Well, maybe, but
going to small colleges did allow me to play whatever sports I wanted, and that was probably what I was most interested in. One sport I did not play, though, was soccer. You played soccer.
Yeah.
Right now,
I did.
Probably by the time this episode airs, the United States national women's team will have played in the World Cup quarterfinal game against France. But with their success thus far, we're seeing yet again the cry for these women to be paid the same amount that the male soccer players are on the national team.
Yeah.
And that has been met with resistance from some people.
Yeah. Yeah.
So why should a team that goes and wins the World Cup every other time they play in it not be compensated as well as the men's team, which struggles to be one of the top 30 teams in the world?
Well, listen, the landscape in men's and women's soccer, as in most sports, is so completely different. And an example of that, most countries were barely supporting their women's teams up until a few years ago. And of course, in the U.S., with Title IX and things like that, we've given a lot more equality towards women's sports in the high school and college levels, which in turn has built more girls playing sports, which allows a national team to succeed over other countries where that isn't prioritized. But as far as salary goes, one thing that I don't think enough people are talking about is the national team is not the main, and it's not meant to be the main way that these players make their living.
Right.
If you look at the men's game, the salaries mainly are coming from their clubs, whether it be an MLS team here in the States or a team over in Europe. They're getting the bulk of their salaries from their clubs. And their clubs, as the ones who are paying most of the money and where most soccer players play the majority of their games, the clubs are in turn setting the market for what these players are worth, salary-wise.
Right.
And then it's the same on the other side of the coin with the women. It's starting to become more prevalent, the women's professional club game. But for a long time, the U.S. was really the only game in town. And even here, there were, time after time, people trying to start up women's leagues, and then they'd fold within a couple of years.
Yeah.
Just not the demand there for it, not working out. Now you're starting to see more and more European clubs, the big clubs, are starting to also field women's teams. But of course, the salary demands and things, the viewership and things like that are not nearly there compared to the men. But so think about it this way. Let's just make up some numbers. A men's player is playing for his club, and he's making $4 million a year in his club. Mm-hmm. He gets called into the national team. When you get called into the national team, it's not required. It's up to you whether you want to accept that call and play for the team or not. Most people will because, you want to represent your country. They offer him $10,000 to play 4 games.
Right.
That's not much compared to what he's making.
Are you going to risk signing?
Right. He's risking his career, his millions
his $4 million per year and maybe $5 million per year in the next contract to go play for $2,500 a game.
Right. So the market for his value has been set independently, not by any, anyone trying to be discriminatory or anything, just by what people are willing to pay has been set much higher. Whereas a women's player will be making on a club level, say they're playing in the NWSL, the American Women's League, they're probably going to be making a small fraction of that on their club level. So then they get called in for the national team, and you offer them that $10,000 for 4 games. Mm-hmm. That's going to be a bit of a different story.
Right.
Comparatively, because that's more in line with what they're going to make in their club games. So these women, if they're that good and USA is not going to win the World Cup without them, just don't play. Right. I mean, that's their option, and they've talked about it before, a strike, but I don't think that is going to happen now. They've kind of postponed. They're in a lawsuit. There's actually a lawsuit from a lot of the top women's players against the USSF, the U.S. Soccer Federation, over equal pay, a pay dispute. They've shelved that and put that aside until after the World Cup, at which time they've agreed that they're going to have mediators to try and help settle the dispute. But the other thing is the agreement that they're working under right now, it's something they all signed on to, and they had collective bargaining not that long ago, and they agreed to it. So you have to wonder there as well, like, when you agree to a contract,
right,
and then just a couple years later you're saying that that's not fair. Well, what changed in that time period?
So if you really want these women to be paid as much as the men because you think they're better than the men, first of all, they're not. They're
that's
just
silly.
They're like in a head-to-head matchup with the men, they would get destroyed, and they consistently lose to youth teams.
Yeah.
That's MLS sides.
You can look up online, you can see articles about them. The one that I've seen most is the US women's team played in a scrimmage. I want to say this is 2017, I'm not positive, and I believe it was the FC Dallas youth team that they played. U15 team. They lost 5-2. So the women's team lost 5-2 to the youth boys team. Now, I'm not saying that doesn't prove that there's no value in women's soccer, or that they shouldn't bother playing, or that they shouldn't be paid. But there absolutely can be
value in women's sports. I mean, look at how much more popular something like volleyball is among women than men.
Well, yeah, all it really does is disprove that argument that, most people with common sense won't make, but unfortunately there are a lot of people that make it like, the women's team is so much better than the men's team. I'd like to see them play head to head. The women's team would win because they can win the World Cup, whatever. No, it's totally different playing field, a totally different spectrum of competition, and that's just one little nugget that proves it.
But if these women are going to be paid more, then the solution for all of these people is, instead of just saying they should be paid more on Twitter, you need to go to their club games.
Right.
And fill those stadiums so that people know you actually like women's soccer.
And how many of these people complaining are actually doing that? Not many. Otherwise, the salaries would be.
Whereas
a lot
I know
different.
that soccer, the MLS, is not the most popular thing in the world. But it's getting to, they're going to have 25 teams. It's going to be the 5th biggest sports league of any kind in America.
A lot of investors clamoring to get into it. I mean, it's a competition between different cities. Like the MLS has lots of investor groups that want to pay $200 million just to get in the league. And that's not just for fun. That's because they see a real money-making opportunity there, of course. That's not exactly happening for the women's league for whatever reason.
But if that did happen, then the women should absolutely be paid the same or more than the men.
Right. I mean, yeah, that would be fair. But the landscape as it exists right now, it's just so ludicrous. And people who know the actual factors at play are a lot less likely to advocate that the U.S. women's team and the men's team should be paid exactly the same. It just doesn't make sense when you look at these factors.
Right.
Have we said enough
about that?
Yeah, I don't know.
Yes, yeah, we have. And hopefully we didn't make you too upset. This was definitely the most controversial thing I've ever done here. I know Tim Baker on the You, Me, and BTC network family of podcasts will occasionally spout his opinions. Usually I stay out of that in relation to things like gender and politics, but we're back, and we're back with a bang. That's why I wanted to...
Just don't blame it on me. If it's
Jake Harp, most controversial man all time.
Yeah.
But I really do appreciate all of you out there who listening. I hope that you've enjoyed our return, and we'd really, really love to do it again shortly. So go ahead and check us out, youmeandbtc.com in the future, because we're going to be putting up more articles and more podcasts because, we think that in the current landscape there may be a bit more of a demand for it, and we would just like to see that support to encourage us to keep doing more and more. So that's all for Unpopular Opinions. We spouted a lot of them today. Dan Brown just came back in the room, producer super number
Got done
one
with his nap,
except when he couldn't get our microphones working, and then goofed us up right in the middle of the episode. Jake and I forgot what we were talking about. Anyways, we'll talk to you next time.
Thanks for having me.
All right, yeah, my pleasure.